This morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci will be back in the hot seat on Capitol Hill. He's under new fire after the release of portions, huge portions, of his personal diary that he kept during the COVID pandemic. Fauci theorized about where the virus started, at one point referencing press reports of his flip-flopping on the origin theory. Fauci also wrote about an increasingly strained relationship with then President Trump. In mid-2020, Trump complained that Fauci was losing his economy trillions of dollars. And months later, Fauci privately called Trump an idiot for downplaying the death toll. News Nation Washington correspondent Tom Dempsey joins us live from the Capitol this morning. Tom, Dr. Fauci will face Senator Rand Paul, who released these documents over the weekend. They've had these testy exchanges before. What are we expecting today?
Hey, Marky, good morning from Washington, D.C. This Senate hearing happening later this morning will be a big showdown between Senator Rand Paul and former White House medical advisor Anthony Fauci, with Senator Paul accusing Fauci of misleading the public about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. But, Marky, this feud really stretches back several years, with Senator Paul criticizing Fauci for his handling of the pandemic and its fallout, which leads us to today. Senator Paul subpoenaed Fauci, accusing him of allegedly covering up U.S. involvement in research at a Chinese lab that Paul believes caused the pandemic. Paul also accuses Fauci of lying under oath and writing off the lab leak theory as a conspiracy theory. The senator has promised this hearing and promoted it for days on social media. And as part of this buildup, he released over 1,000 pages, like you said, from Fauci's private diary kept at the time of the pandemic, where Fauci talks about his growing media interest and national profile, among other things. Expect entries like this to be a big focus of today's hearing. In January of 2020, Fauci wrote, quote, "Now we know the market was not the source, it was the amplifier. Having said that, somewhere the virus jumped from animals to humans." Senator Paul may also zero in on entries like this one from March 2020, where Fauci wrote, quote, "Press is going wild with me." Front page in Washington Post yesterday, an op-ed by Maureen Dowd in New York Times today about me and my relationship with the President of the United States. After releasing these diary entries, Senator Paul posted to X, quote, "I have said for years that Anthony Fauci cared more about his own image than the truth, and now his own diary proves it." And adding, quote, "If Anthony Fauci lies before Congress on Wednesday, as he did in previous hearings, his preemptive pardon won't cover him." Fauci received a preemptive pardon from President Biden, who said he wanted to protect public servants. But again, this is going to be a hearing to watch. Expect some very big moments to happen. Fauci has denied those accusations against him, but he's going to be pressed big time by Senator Paul and other senators when that hearing kicks off at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time.
When
Marky?
he's in the hot seat. I mean, talk about, Tom, a surprise publishing this week of his diary. I have so many questions there. But President Trump was obviously in office in 2020, oversaw the first year of the pandemic response. What's Trump saying about the hearing today? Anything?
Yeah, it was interesting to hear sort of his reactions ahead of this big hearing happening later this morning. And he once again criticized Fauci for his handling of the pandemic years ago.
Well, if you remember early on when it first came, I always said it came from the Wuhan labs. I never changed my tune on that. I think he said something different. He was a much bigger player in the Biden administration. I grew tired of him. He was, you remember that, he wanted to close everything down. I allowed it to be up to the governors, and most or many of the Republican governors didn't want to close.
Again, expect those diary entries to be a key part of today's hearing. And Fauci, for his part, said that all that media attention also led to some negative impacts, including threatening emails and texts and all sorts of hateful language against him. Marky?
Yeah, big morning ahead. Tom Dempsey live in the Capitol. Thank you. For more, let me bring in thehill.com's White House correspondent, Julia Manchester. Julia, thanks for joining me ahead of a huge day. This is obviously the first time we'll hear from Dr. Fauci, since in a couple years, really. First off, what's the reporting behind how Rand Paul got a hold of his diary in the first place?
Yeah, so we know that Dr. Fauci was keeping these personal diaries, and we have to note they are personal in nature, in part to take notes for a memoir, but it appears that he was keeping some of these notes on work computers. So it was, relatively easy for Rand Paul to subpoena or obtain those government computers and the records on those computers. So that's how he got this. And so it's all really dating back, Marky, to Rand Paul and a number of other conservatives push really to find out the origin of COVID-19. We know that Rand Paul is a supporter of the Wuhan lab theory that states, obviously, that the virus originated in a lab. Now, Fauci has not said one way or another whether he believes the virus originated in a lab. However, he talks about during the pandemic or the run-up to the pandemic in 2020, he and a number of scientists around the world, at least 11 of them, did have conversations, and there was some belief among some of those, at least two of those scientists, that they believed this could have originated in a lab, but there was not a full consensus. So that's sort of what Paul is getting to the bottom of today.
Yeah, I know that to your point, just to elaborate there, in part of his entry, Fauci wrote, "We know the market was not the source, it was an amplifier." And in another entry, he wrote that several international health officials believed deliberate insertion was possible, hinting at that lab leak theory. How starkly different was what he wrote versus what he told us publicly during those years?
Well, it is somewhat different, but I don't necessarily know if there's enough room for someone to accuse Fauci of lying, because we know that Fauci has not said really one way or another where the virus originally came from. I think you will see conservatives like Paul today on that panel really try to make that case. But the fact of the matter is, it seemed, based on Fauci's diaries and what he said in the past, is that there really wasn't, a concise consensus on where this originally came from. It does seem that, his comments in his diary noting that there was some thought in the scientific or medical community that, this could have come from a lab. That does seem to be some of his, more strong statements hinting at, this was a real possibility. But I would say overall, there wasn't a real smoking gun here.
And I mean, think about back to the beginning days of this, and just in terms of his relationship with the president, what a fall from grace, for Fauci. President Trump was the one who made Dr. Fauci the face of the COVID response in 2020. How did he go from being the administration's public-facing figurehead on this to one of its top targets now?
Well, it seems like there's two sides to this story, Marky. Fauci, details in his diaries that there were disagreements with President Trump, that President Trump initially, really liked him and was really trying to amplify his voice during the pandemic. But Fauci, in those diary entries suggests that he soured on Trump, in part because of how Trump himself was handling the pandemic. And Fauci and maybe some of his supporters or Trump's critics would argue that President Trump wanted to be the face of the administration's response to the pandemic. Now, others would say, more maybe supporters of President Trump, critics of Fauci, would say that this all changed because of Fauci's theories on lockdowns and shutdowns during COVID. And we know that Fauci said in an interview with The View, the talk show a few years ago, that he had nothing to do with lockdowns or shutdowns. But one of the key parts of these diary entries is that he says that he had conversations with California Governor Gavin Newsom and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio about potential lockdowns or shutdowns, and says he did suggest them in some conversations.
Well, fireworks are sure to fly, and I'll actually be joined by Dr. Deborah Birx later on in the show, who is on the COVID task force alongside Dr. Fauci later on in the show. Julia Manchester, thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's get to some